The stories of life, the heartfelt stories, and how to deal with them on a daily basis, as Laura has just shared, is something that is more meaningful and more real than what we can read in a book. It's real life. I loved her comment about Plan B being better than Plan A, because I do think we get caught up in thinking there's only one way to do something. And many times, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D are the better ways. So thank you for sharing that. I did buy her book. I'm going to get another copy. I think just putting it in the break room at my office, letting people know it's there, starting those dialogues, those conversations, is a good way to just introduce the idea to start the conversations. We live in East Texas, and we have kind of a mentality that these big, tough guys can't have any issues. And we're going to hear a story from somebody that's even tougher than the guys in East Texas. He's from New York City, that is. Mike Veny managed to overcome a lifetime of mental health challenges to become a professional drummer and one of America's leading mental health speakers. I had the opportunity to meet him and his wife last night. I have promised that I will not call him a motivational speaker. You will hear his story. His advocacy work has been featured on ABC, NBC, CBS. He's also a writer for Corporate Wellness magazine, HealthCentral.com, delivered a TED Talk titled Mental Illness is an Asset. And yesterday, Mike was able to hold a drum workshop with the local youth at Premier High School here in Tyler. As Mike gets ready to transition up here, we have a short clip of his time with these high school students and their drumming exercises. Mike, we look forward to hearing from you. Let it roll.
I was a student in school who struggled with behavioral health issues, and I'm a big believer that mental health issues and emotional issues and social issues all go hand in hand.
Classmates who are so quiet really kind of just step out of their shells and come into their own rhythms. It was really cool to see that.
To see them participate in a group setting where they're able to express themselves musically, I saw a lot of smiles on faces. It was good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We came from New York, and we were super excited to be here because we were going to eat some Texas food this weekend. And I love food. Food is very important to me. And I'd like to dedicate my presentation today to my hamster. He's dead. He's been dead a few years. But I used to have this little dwarf hamster. And when you buy a hamster, they're cute. And he had some mental health issues too, but that's a whole nother conversation. But the hamster, one day I discovered that there was something in his eye. And so he was like holding the eye shut. And I figured, oh no, I need to get my hamster help. So I made my first ever trip to a veterinarian. And I learned that veterinarians are very expensive. They gave my hamster a physical, which included weighing him in a foam cereal bowl. $100 for that. So eventually the veterinarian comes and puts on the rubber gloves and holds my hamster to figure out what's going on in his eye. And my little hamster bit the veterinarian. So he had to put the hamster down. And he went out and got a nurse to come into the room. So now we have two grown adults having to come in and restrain my little dwarf hamster. Now, part of me thought, you know, my hamster's pretty cool, yeah. But part of me was starting to get some real anxiety, heavy anxiety. I didn't know why. Eventually, the hamster actually bit her. And she went out of the room, and I heard her in the hall talking smack that she wasn't going to go back in the room with that hamster. And finally, we got 3 adults to restrain my little hamster, and they opened his eye and figured out what it was. And I promised myself that day that I was never going back to the veterinarian. It was way too triggering. Because seeing my hamster get restrained like that reminded me of being in the mental hospital way too much. And I've had to deal with it way too many times. I don't want to go back there. I love food. I was at Stanley's Barbecue Pit. Some of the best ribs I've ever had in my life, by the way. But I couldn't help but notice across the street was the hospital. And every time I'm in a town speaking and I see a hospital, I always have to wonder, what if I go into crisis? I might have to go back there. Today I'm going to be talking about mental health and transforming the stigma around it. And one of the things that we were talking about last night, I don't like the term motivational speaker, even though that describes exactly what I do. One of the reasons is sometimes I think motivational speakers are fluffy and just, you know, you can do it and all that stuff. And I'm just not one of those speakers. I like to be practical. So ladies and gentlemen, one of the things I'm promising you is that if you listen to me today and really trust what I have to say, within 24 hours, you can actually transform the stigma surrounding mental health. That's my guarantee to you as my audience today. You know, when we use the term mental health, the word mental is usually referring to of the brain. But when we talk about mental health, we're actually talking about 3 things: thoughts, feelings, and behavior. If any of those is causing you problems, you probably have a mental health issue. When we talk about stigma, the definition of stigma is a mark of shame. But we're also talking about thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Thoughts are stereotypes. You were coming to a mental health event today. You might have had a stereotype in your mind of what you were going to hear today. Feelings are prejudice. You guys don't want me on the team because you know I have issues. You're uncomfortable when I walk in the room. And behavior is discrimination. You can't get a job here. You're kicked out. And this affects people in all levels of society. And when people ask me where stigma comes from, this is something we can go into talking about for hours, but I just want to share 2 very simple points. Number 1, mental health issues are confusing and frustrating for both the person struggling and the people who love them, and even the professionals. And we as humans don't like being confused. Sadly, I got the news this week about the Las Vegas attack. And right away, without even looking at the news, I knew that people wanted answers. And right away, the media goes right to mental health, mental illness. Again, we don't like to be confused. You know, I was working out in the gym once and doing a push-up routine that involved switching my hands to different positions. And I'm not gonna lie, I was trying to impress this girl in the gym. And I ended up hurting my wrist. So I totally played it off and went home, and I knew that I needed to ice my wrist, and it was either a sprain, a strain, or a broken wrist. In a few days, if it didn't get better, call a doctor. It's simple. But most of us don't wake up and go, oh, I'm depressed today. I should talk to someone about it. It's something that you discover over time. And I said to you before, mental health issues are about thoughts, feelings, and behavior. You cannot see someone's thoughts. You cannot feel someone's feelings. You can try to interpret them, but you can definitely observe their behavior. And that's where my story begins. When I was younger, I struggled with a lot of behavioral issues. I remember being 5 years old, 6 years old, always being told to behave and getting yelled at for stuff. And I guess I was a discipline problem for my parents. I have a younger brother, and he was very well behaved. He always did what he was told. He cried a lot sometimes, but he did what he was told. But I was always misbehaving. And so I used to have to go to a lot of doctors, and I didn't know why I had to keep going to these doctors. I just knew that I wasn't behaving, and we had to keep talking about that. So eventually my parents had a wonderful idea. They decided to put me in a place called Catholic school. You know where this is going. It's not going to end good. And they figured that these people called nuns would straighten me out. Now, I got to warn you, I tend to have a defiance issue. Oppositional defiance disorder is one of the things that I have been diagnosed with. And so I'll never forget 4th grade. I did good for 2nd grade and 3rd grade, but 4th grade, and we've all had this experience in school where you get that one teacher that nobody wants, right? That one teacher that's got the reputation. It's like, oh man. Her name was Sister Pat. Never forget this woman. In fact, my brother said that he went to a memorial for the school, and she had passed away many years ago, but even at the memorial, they were still talking bad about her. Wasn't just me. But I'll never forget the day I was one of those kids that I tend to smile a lot. And the interesting thing about mental health issues is, again, you cannot see them. And people can walk around confident and smiling and still have issues. And so I was smiling in the back of the room, sitting in my seat. And, in Catholic school, I guess that's a no-no. You're not supposed to smile or something. So I'm sitting there. I remember it like it was yesterday. And Sister Pat approached me, yelling, and told me to wipe the smile off my face. And I did the thing you're not supposed to do. I said no. Now, you know how this goes down in 4th grade. Everybody's like, ooh. And she then approached me and started yelling at me. And I started saying some words that I'm not going to repeat in a church. And then she proceeded to grab my arm and pull me out of the desk. And I punched that woman as hard as I could. She then proceeded to take holy water and throw it on me and call me the devil. I took the holy water off and threw it back at her and said, put this on your wrinkles. I wasn't going back to that school. Mommy and Daddy had a talk with me that night at the kitchen table. They said, Michael, you can't just do that, You have to learn to respect adults. And I said, nobody has a right to talk down to me. They said, but you still need to behave. And I'm 38 years old, and nobody has a right to talk down to me. I don't punch people anymore, though. So, first part of 4th grade, I'm kicked out after a month. My parents had another idea. Put me in public school where my uncle was the principal. This would be good for his career as an administrator. Poor Uncle Billy. And good for me. Long story short, after 3 weeks and several fights and a desk mysteriously flying out of my hands in the direction of a teacher, I was expelled from that school. The rest of 4th grade was the absolute best year of my life because I had home tutoring for 1 hour a day. I loved it. And this tutor, she came in, she was so scared of me, she didn't make eye contact. Anything I would ask, she would just yes me to death and quickly get out of the house. Around that summer, between 4th and 5th grade, Batman came out. And for those of you that are Batman fans, I'm not talking about no Christian Bale or Ben Affleck. I'm talking about Michael Keaton starring as Batman. And Jack Nicholson was the Joker, and I loved it. They took me to see the movie. It was great. And they promised me if I behaved, I could be Batman or the Joker for Halloween. And I was super excited. But something happened after that movie. I don't know if I was triggered by something in the movie or something my parents said. But I came home, and I got angrier than I ever have in my life, and I don't know why. And I went into what we call a rage, where you just cannot stop being angry. And I just couldn't stop. My parents tried to restrain me. I did not care. I fought back. And I was so explosive, you could just yell at me or look at me the wrong way, I was gonna hurt you. You know, and the next thing I know is put in a mental hospital in 4th grade. And those are scary places, you know, and I knew right away I was a crazy person. Only crazy people go to the mental hospital. And my parents said, nobody can know about this. We gotta get you the help you need. And I quickly learned the secret to getting out of the mental hospital after 3 weeks. You just have to have a persuasive story that you have coping skills. That was my start of becoming a professional speaker, by the way. In 5th grade, I was put in special education. I had this teacher, a very small woman, but she scared me. In fact, I saw her about 2 years ago, and she still scares me. I keep my distance. I don't know why. But she's the only teacher that I never really messed with. However, I did find a way to annoy her. I would sit there and just be at my desk and tap on my desk and make beats, just doing my thing. And eventually they let me go into the drum class, and I loved it. It was the greatest thing in the world. Getting to take drumsticks and hit a drum made me so happy. And some of the people in the band class wanted to be my friend. It felt good. When I was out of the drum class, I was experiencing what I would later learn is a thing called depression. And when you have depression, again, think about what I said before. Mental health issues are confusing and frustrating. You don't understand what's going on. I just knew that I was sad every single day. And like Laura Grace, you know, people want solutions. When you're in a bad place mentally, you just want a solution. And we are a society that wants solution. You know, if your car is having an issue, you don't take it to the mechanic and the mechanic says, well, before we can repair it, let's talk about the history that your car has been through. You'd be frustrated. You know, what's wrong with this mechanic? And when it comes to depression, we just want an answer because we're in pain. And for me, I just needed a solution. So I came home one day at 10 years old and went into the medicine cabinet, and I knew that you could end your own life by taking all your medicine. And like Laura Grace, I took all my pills. And Mommy found me, and she was screaming and yelling and got me to the hospital as fast as she could and to get my stomach pumped. And if she probably didn't do that, I wouldn't be here today. But at the same time, I was pissed. It's like, why are you doing this? I want to end my life. And my parents tried to even work harder to get me the help that I needed. But nothing seemed to help. It was just getting worse and worse. 6th grade, I started doing a little better. So 7th grade, they put me into a different school now, not in special education. And I was actually doing okay in school with behavior, but at home, 13 years old now, I'm starting to experience depression and anger at a heightened level. And I hate to stand up here on this stage and tell you this. I'm embarrassed, actually. But when I was 13 and I was angry at home in a rage, that's not a rage anymore. That's violence. I was violent towards my mother, my father, and my brother. I would snap, and I didn't know why. And I also started doing this thing called cutting because the pain was so bad. You know, Laura Grace said it best. You know, we just want to take away the pain when we cut. And I want to share something with you about cutting because it's a big problem for everyone, not just young people. There are 3 reasons why people cut. Number 1, to take away the pain. And temporarily, it does work. Number 2, it can actually become an addiction. Ladies and gentlemen, each week I travel this country and I got to find a CVS or Walgreens to find Gillette razors to shave this here head. And I don't get just the regular razors, I get the ones that vibrate, the expensive ones, right? But you know what? Sometimes when I'm in the drugstore, I linger a little too long in the razor aisle, thinking maybe I need to buy some extra ones. And I have to quickly get myself out of there because cutting can actually become an addiction. The third reason that people cut, particularly young people, is they think it's cool. That one, I don't understand. Back to 7th grade. So there I am, cutting, acting out at home. I was put in a hospital this time for 6 months. I had to miss Christmas because I was in the hospital. Eventually, I started to behave because they didn't buy my story this time of coping skills, and they gave me weekend passes. And the weekend passes were great because I went home. My parents wanted to do a bunch of family activities, but I didn't want to do any of that stuff. I locked myself in my bedroom and I played drums to Red Hot Chili Peppers and LL Cool J. That's all I wanted to do. And I come out sweaty and go back to the mental hospital for the week. Between 7th and 10th grade, I was on a first name basis, I'm proud to say, with the local police, the emergency room. Everyone knew my name. I knew their favorite sports teams. Mike was always in crisis about something. And that's the world I knew. And it made it really difficult to have deep friendships. You know, I was that kid that nobody wanted their kid hanging out with. And I knew something was wrong with me because my emotions were hard to control. I was sad, I was angry, I was anxious, all these things. And it just like, you know, when people ask me what it's like, I always describe my mental health issues like a kitchen because I told you I love food, right? And if you want to be my friend, you have to love food. That's my main requirement for friendship with me. And so when I describe my kitchen, the way I love to describe it is it does not just have a normal home oven in it. It's got a big industrial Viking restaurant oven. And this thing has got 4 burners on it, and typically simmering in some lard over here is my obsessive compulsive disorder. You know, I've been here in Tyler for a few days and I can't stop obsessing about the fact that my betta fish seems sick and he might be dead when I get home. It might seem silly, but it's making it really difficult to even concentrate right now because I cannot stop thinking about my fish. It's on repeat. Right over here on this burner is my anxiety. I'm standing in front of a bunch of people I don't know. You're all just staring at me. Right over here is my anger and depression because I can snap at any time. But on this 4th burner is a stock pot. And I can take the ingredients from each frying pan, put it into the stock pot, close the lid and turn up the heat. That's a problem waiting to happen. But the kitchen has some other cool features. It's got a curved mirror right there and a slanted one right there because everywhere I look, everything is about me and it's distorted. I'm in the kitchen right now. I live in this kitchen every day. And that's what I struggled with as a youth. By the time that I was 15 years old, I had been hospitalized for a total of 3 times, expelled from 3 schools, several suicide attempts, regularly self-harming, and violent at home. My parents had a problem. All the while, my younger brother, Jason, was doing just fine. Everyone liked Jason. Jason was getting good grades. And so that summer, my parents kind of got used to the fact that this was going to be how things were. But they just wanted the best for me, right? Parents just want the best for you. And so my mother, and I love my mother, but I want to say something about mothers, because I know we have some mothers in this room. Mothers are the absolute sneakiest people on the planet. When they band together, they're like little ninjas that get stuff done. And they approach you with this thing I call the mommy look. And you know they're up to something. So that summer I was in the driveway and my parents were outside and they came to approach me and mommy had the mommy look on her face. And she said, I have to ask you something. And I backed off. I said, well, what's going on? She said, it's just a question, Michael. Relax. Well, what's your question, Mommy? And she said, what would make you happy? this is a trick. I said, what do you mean? She said, no. What would make you happy? We try to tell you to get coping skills. We take you to all these doctors. You're on all this medication. What would make you happy? And I told her the truth. I said, the only thing that would make me happy is playing the drums all day, 24/7. And my dad said, absolutely not in my house. Okay, but my mother, moms are sneaky. She said, give me a week to figure this out. So for an entire week, by the way, I have no patience, by the way, just so you know. I wanted to know what was going on. Mommy was up to something. And so I asked her, I said, Mommy, can you tell me what's going on? She said, Michael, calm down, we'll talk about it on Saturday. I said, no, tell me! She said, Michael, you need to calm down. So Saturday came around and I got up early and came downstairs and I said, Mommy, what's up? And she said, I found a performing arts high school for you that will accept you to play drums. And I get upset because it was the first time in my life I felt hope, because drumming was the only thing that made me happy. And I'll never, ever forget what it was like to go into a performing arts high school for the first time. I was the same height that I am now. I had some serious hair. I missed that hair. Was about 50 pounds lighter. Had on some ripped up jeans and Chuck Taylors. And there I was amongst my fellow artists. And I loved being in a performing arts high school. It was great. People started to accept me for me. And my grades started to go up. And the medication started to go down. And things started to get better. Until one day, this teacher with this greasy mullet, never forget that mullet, he screamed at me about something. And I knew it was done. I said, this is it. You know, all the stuff that I worked for, finally have the thing that I want, it's done. And so instead of pulling my usual routine, which would involve getting suspended, expelled, the police, or the hospital, I actually walked out of class. And the cool thing about a performing arts high school is that they have practice rooms throughout the school where you can just go in and practice your instrument. So I went to a practice room and there was a drum set in there and I went to go play drums by myself. By the way, I brought my African drum. Can I play drums for you? So I just stormed in the room, just started to do my thing, and my wife was looking at me. Hi. Hi, honey. I'm gonna play drums right now. Oh, I gotta take a different microphone, okay. That's my wife, by the way, that's Danelle. We just got married on July 3rd. I thought I was in trouble for something, okay. So, I'm in the room playing drums by myself. And the teacher came in the room and said, Michael, you need to be in class. I said, I know. And then he said, 15 minutes. And for the first time in my life, I calmed down. About a month later, I wanted me a girlfriend. Now, as you can imagine, I had some difficulties with that. I mean, some of the girls thought I was cool, but most kind of kept their distance. So I liked this one girl, and she didn't like me back. I got upset, and I just stormed out of class and just went into the practice room to play drums again by myself. Teacher came in the room, same teacher with the big greasy mullet, and said, Mike, you need to be in class. Same conversation. I said, I know. He said, 15 minutes. Then he asked me a question that changed my life. He said, can I hire you to play drums in my band? And ladies and gentlemen, at that point in time, switch my microphone here. The light bulb went off. When I acted out the other way, I ended up in the mental hospital with the police or in trouble. But when I acted out on the drums, people wanted to give me money. So, as a high school senior, I had to confront my parents with the conversation no parents of a high school senior want to have, especially when my brother is planning on going to law school. So I said, Mommy and Daddy, I want to be a professional drummer. And their heads went down like this. Well, I'm proud to say that, in the first year of college, you have this first semester and all of your friends are going out to party. I was being flown around the country, being paid thousands of dollars to play drums. The career actually worked. And one thing I'm really proud to say was that coming into the Dallas airport was a nice memory because my first real high-paying gig as a musician was in Dallas, Texas. It's great to be back. And so the career worked, things got better, and I had different incidents throughout the years, but nothing bad. I was on no medication for a while. And then around 2011, I actually had a breakdown again. And I felt frustrated because I thought the drumming was supposed to cure my mental health issues. But around 2011, I started to become suicidal, angry, frustrated, agitated, acting out. And what did I do? I reached out for help and got the help that I needed. I made a call that changed my life. And I realized something at that time, that it wasn't just my mental health issues that were frustrating. It was if you found out about my issues. It's if someone heard about it. I mean, I'd have to go on dates with women and, one date would be good, second date's great, third date they ask about my childhood and realize they're dating a psycho. It was hard, and I always have to wonder if I became friends with someone, what if I ended up just losing it? Were they still going to be my friend? And so it was a really, really difficult thing for me, this thing called stigma. And one of the things that I wish I had had as a young person is an understanding of stigma, because for a lot of people, yes, mental health issues are a challenge, but the bigger challenge is the shame around the mental health issues. I actually believe that stigma is a cycle. I said to you before, the definition is a mark of shame, but I actually think it's much bigger than that. It's a cycle that starts with shame. I could feel shame, or you could feel shame because you love me and you don't want people we know to know about it. Shame leads to silence. We don't talk about it. And the silence leads to sabotage, self-destructive behavior, social injustice, and suicide. Let me say it again. Stigma starts with shame. Shame leads to silence, and silence leads to sabotage, self-destructive behavior, social injustice, and suicide. But ladies and gentlemen, here in Tyler, Texas, the reason I flew in from New York was not just for ribs. I actually have a solution for you. And it's a solution that if you follow what I am saying, you will not only help youth here in Texas, but you'll help yourselves. Stigma starts with shame. What is the opposite of shame? The opposite of shame is pride and honor. So how do you get yourself to a place of pride and honor? The answer is very simple: self-care. I actually had to do an article, which I have a few copies of outside, called How to Practice Self-Care Without Being Selfish. People talk about self-care all the time. It's a buzz phrase we throw around. But when I was researching for this article about self-care, I learned that only 5% of people with chronic health conditions practice self-care. Basically, it's statistically zero. It's a buzz phrase that we throw out all the time. I was doing a big mental health conference last week, 1,500 people, and it was actually all about self-care. The whole conference was about self-care. So I'm up here on the stage, and I'm talking about self-care like I am now, and I said to the audience, I said, ladies and gentlemen, I gave you a self-care assessment. And they're like, what? Yes, I did an assessment. I just wanted to say that word because I, want to sound big and all that, right? So they said, they were looking at me like, what was the assessment? And the assessment was very simple. We were at a mental health conference that people had flown to for self-care. But that morning I woke up at 6:30 a.m. and went to the gym. And out of 1,500 people in the hotel gym, there were only 3. Interesting. We're at a conference about self-care, 1,500 people and only 3 people in the gym. But the bar the night before, 100 people. You have to be intentional about it. I learned about self-care the hard way. I told you I live in New York City. I was in a very small apartment. We have very small buildings in New York City. And one day I came home and I'll never forget the leak. There was a leak in the ceiling, and leaks just drive me crazy. So I see the leak, and I decided to be proactive even though I was frustrated. And I went upstairs and knocked on the person's door saying, hey, there's a leak. No response. So I took a piece of paper and a pen, wrote my name, my cell phone number, and a big smiley face. Call me. 3 days later, the leak is worse. What's going on here? I go upstairs, same thing, no response. I called the landlord, and believe it or not, the landlord did not know who lived up there. It's New York City, by the way. So after about 7 days, I came home to a memory I will never forget. The ceiling in the living room had fallen. And not only did it fall, but it fell on my hamster's cage. He didn't die, but my hamster, even though he was tough and aggressive, he looked sad. And my whole thing is, look, you can mess with me, but you don't mess with my pets. That crosses the line. And so I got so angry and just stormed out of my apartment. I needed to calm down. I wanted to punch somebody. And as I'm walking down the street, I get a call from the guy that lives upstairs. He's got this German accent and this attitude. He said, what's your problem? So, what? You need to meet me in front of my apartment, I said. So I get to my apartment, ready to confront this guy. I'm ready for a fight. And standing in front of me is a 6'5" German bodybuilder. It's amazing how your perspective changes real quick. It's like, hi, can I show you the leak? I was like, yo, you work out? He said, yeah, I'm a trainer. Okay. I'm like taking pictures of him on my phone and stuff, right? And I made him apologize to the hamster, though. And I told him I was a drummer. We exchanged cards, and I was just like, okay, this is just another weird day in the world of Mike Veny. End of the year, I decided, like most adults, that I have to get in shape. That's my New Year's resolution, right? That's everyone's New Year's resolution, get in shape. So I decided to call the German bodybuilder and get a free consultation. And I found myself in a tiny room in a big bodybuilding gym with the German trainer. And he's one of those people that doesn't break eye contact, which is very awkward. So he's just staring at me and asking questions. And I told him the truth. I like bacon, cheese, and garlic and fatty foods. He asked me about injuries, but he just kept staring at me. It was getting kind of weird after a while. So I got a little freaked out, and I said, thank you. I got to get going. Can you just email me the routine? And he said, wait, I got to tell you something. So what do you got to tell me? He said, I've been to your website. I said, oh, my drumming website. He said, no, your mental health website. Oh, you got something you want to talk about? And he started to tear up. He said, Mike, I have about 5% body fat. I'm a fitness model. I'm on the cover of a lot of fitness magazines. And I battle bipolar disorder. And it sucks. And he handed me a workout routine and a nutrition plan. And he said, this is not going to help your tummy or your arms. It's going to help your mental health. This workout routine has helped me a lot. And since then, he's been helping me periodically. I haven't seen him recently, but he's been helping me work on taking care of my mental health through my physical health. And a strange thing started to happen. When I started to take care of myself, the depression was still there, but I started to feel better about myself. Like, the depression's painful, but it's okay. So when you actually practice self-care, you will feel better about yourself. The key to transforming shame is self-care. The key to transforming silence is to put the subject of mental health in everyday conversation. Mommy and Daddy told me as a youth that no one could know about my issues. No one can know about it. But I decided to do an experiment for an entire year. And Tyler, I need you to promise me that you will not do this. Say, I promise. I'm a troublemaker, as you know. I decided for an entire year to introduce myself to every single person I met and say, "Hi, my name is Mike. I'm mentally ill." I just wanted to see what would happen, you know? Because everybody's like, "No, you don't talk about this. That's private. That's private." But I want to see what would happen. Now, keep in mind, a lot of my work, I have to interact with CEOs, go to networking events, stuff like that. Every single person I met. "Hi, my name is Mike. I'm mentally ill." I'll never forget that year. I got a lot of questions that year from people. I got a lot of hugs. I got invited to a lot of parties. Got hired for a lot of work and hit on by more women than I ever have in my life. But something was wrong. You're not supposed to talk about it. But I realized it wasn't what I was talking about. It was because I felt good about myself. And when you just have the conversation and make it normal. One of the things I want to bring up with you about stigma, and this might seem very painful, but stigma's in this room. It's not something that's out there. You know, we're up here always talking about people need to talk about it, but when we talk about mental health issues to each other, we lower our voice for some reason. Why is that? We're the problem. It's not out there. I found myself on an elevator in New York City once. I don't like elevators, especially ones that don't fully stop on the floor. And I'm on this tiny elevator, and a woman gets on the elevator, and I decided to make conversation. I said, "Hi." She said, "Hi." I said, "This building is sketchy." She didn't find that funny. She said, "I work here." I said, "Whoops." I said, "Well, ma'am, what do you do?" She said, "Well, I'm a therapist." And I said, "Well, I'm mentally ill. Can I have your business card?" You can laugh all you want. She's been my therapist ever since. I made it a normal conversation. You know, I'm going to say something controversial right now. I love bringing this up, especially because I'm speaking in a church. Say stuff I shouldn't say in church. A lot of people want changes in mental health legislation. Am I correct? Do you want to see real changes? You sure? Then there's one thing you have to model yourself after, whether you support it or not. Same-sex marriage. I love saying it, and I love how quiet the room gets. Because you know what? Whether you support it or not, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not even going to tell you where I stand on it. But the LGBTQ community did the most phenomenal job in American history of getting legislation because they forced their cause into everyday conversation. They made it normal. Whether you agreed with it or not, you had to hear about it. Imagine what life would be like if we did that with mental health. I've been in many churches where they say, we need to include our same-sex community, to same-sex loving community to our church. But you bring up depression, and it's like, don't talk about that. It's really important to have a conversation and make it normal. You know, I told you that I run my mouth talking about mental health. I think that the best example of this working out was that I was in Newark Airport, and I had one of those phones where the battery just doesn't stay charged. And you know how important it is to have a charged phone in the airport, right? So I'm hunting around for outlets, and there was this pretty girl next to an outlet. And I admit that I didn't shower that day. I didn't shave that day. This is a bad day for this to happen. But I approached her and I said, "Ma'am, can I share your electricity?" And she gave me that look that women give. It's like, seriously? And so I sat down next to her. She said yes. And she did that thing that women do when they're trying to get away, the squirm, where they like squirm a little away from you. And we talked. I think I was chewing her ear off, and she was just tolerating me. And at the end, I asked her for her business card. She gave me her information, and I gave her my giant mental health brochure. You know, I figured I might get a speaking engagement out of it or something. I don't know. But, you know, I'm proud to say she's my wife. And we spent our first date talking about my mental health because we made it a normal conversation. So the thing that I challenge you all to do is make it a normal conversation. But how do you actually do that in theory? Well, if you are serving youth, start talking about your own mental health. Start talking about your own challenges. Don't tell them they need to and you don't say anything about it. That's called being a hypocrite. You have to start talking about it. And when you start talking about it, it makes everything better. Monica Lewinsky. I just wanted to say that name and see what would happen. No, Monica Lewinsky, she's actually a speaker now. And she's doing a whole series of talks around shame because she had something happen in her life that gave her a lot of shame. But one thing she said that's really powerful is that once she started talking about it, it took the power of the issues away. So for those of us who are struggling, when we don't talk about it, we give the issues power. But when we do talk about it, we make it okay. So the key to transforming silence is to keep it in conversation. Number 3, how do you transform self-destructive behavior? Suicide. You have to force yourself to connect with people. Connecting with people is so important. We live in a society and we're just on cell phones all the time. If you think about our youth who are struggling, they're on Facebook all the time, which, by the way, I have a little purple card on your table with my Facebook if you want to be my friend on the Facebook. But that being said, we don't spend enough time connecting with each other. And if you think about it, mental health issues and people issues kind of go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. If someone is struggling that you know, ask them how many friends they have, and usually the number is pretty low. It's important that we do that. There are 3 words that I want you to remember today if you know someone who is struggling. People always ask me, what do I say? What do I say to someone? 3 words, help me understand. That's it. Because for a lot of us, when we're struggling, we're not looking for solutions. We're in such a dark place. We're not looking for you to provide help. We just want someone to try and understand because we think no one understands and we feel alone. Help me understand and then be quiet about it. The other thing is get involved in support groups. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize right now, the 12-step programs have been very successful for people with substance abuse issues. But there's actually a 12-step program for people with mental health issues that follows the big book of AA. It's called Emotions Anonymous. And it allows people to work those 12 steps and connect with others and help with their mental health issues. It's a powerful program. So it's really important to find ways to connect with other people. So that being said, I want you to think about these 3 points that I gave you. And whether you are a person who is working in mental health, or a person who is struggling with their own challenges, a parent, it's all the same. If you want to transform shame, you've got to take care of yourself. If you want to transform the silence, you got to start talking about it. If you want to transform the self-destructive behavior, you've got to connect with others. That being said, one of the things that I put outside of my exhibit table so you can all have it, we actually went to Office Depot, I think it was, last night, and my wife had a fight with the copy machine, but we got the copies done. We've got several handouts of some of my articles, one actually for people of faith called Transforming Stigma in the Church, which is some resources and ideas for just getting the conversation started with leadership and people in the church. We have a bunch of other articles, Crushed Masculinity and the Agony of Depression. So take them, they're free, they're all for you, and we'll be over there later. But that being said, when I was talking to you before about my history as a youth, the hero of my story was Mommy. And gonna have to lean here on the stage to talk about this. This is kind of heavy. About 1.5 years ago, Mommy died. And she had battled several years of cancer. And so it's been a tough road for me with that. My therapist has been great. I had a breakdown this year because of it. I had to stay in the hospital for 1 night this year because of it, but I'm doing okay now. But one thing I promised myself is that I would never, ever, ever, ever bash or talk negatively about a family member, in my life, in any of my presentations or on my blog. However, if they're dead, They are fair game. I'm sorry, Mommy. One of the things that I've learned in therapy that happened when I was young is I experienced what we call trauma. And when I say the word trauma, a lot of people think Civil War, something really bad happened. But trauma can actually be very subtle. And for my mother, well, she didn't really have very good social skills. She didn't know how to help me process stuff when I was upset. And a lot of times I was stuck in the room watching Sesame Street and just dealing with my emotions and stuck in my head. So all I knew how to do was defend myself emotionally if I felt threatened. And that's one of the reasons that I acted out. And for a lot of the youth that are out there struggling, they're battling many issues like that. They come from a great home, but there's subtle things that are happening because no parent is perfect. I know for a fact that when I finish this presentation, there are going to be several parents that are going to come up to me and say, my kid is just like you. What do I do? We've tried everything. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're a parent and you have a kid that's struggling, the most important thing you could ever do is go to therapy for yourself. And I know that might be very hard to hear, but it's one of the best things that you could do, because had my mom done that, I don't think I would have had the same level of challenges that I did. The other thing that I learned that I want to share with you is that one of the best things that all of you in this room could ever do, whether you are struggling or know someone who is, and this is going to be real scary when I say this, is just learning to sit with your feelings. We are a culture that runs away from our feelings so fast. We feel something, we end up at the bar, we end up acting out, we end up getting busy, whatever we need to do. But it's really important to learn to do that. And that's going to be one of the things that helps the youth that are struggling. Rather than teaching them to pick up a phone, teach them to just sit there with their feelings and allow them to experience it. That being said, my website is transformingstigma.com. And just remember that when you transform stigma, you will help yourself. When you transform stigma, you will help the youth of America. When you transform stigma, you'll actually help the economy of America. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being an incredible audience today.
Mike, thank you. We appreciate you sharing the stories of your life. For all of us, it is about having the conversations. You break down the stigma by putting it on the table.